Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining tonight. I appreciate everybody coming in here and watching. We already got a few people in here watching. I'm really excited. Often I do political spaces. I help political candidates, but this one's a little bit cooler to me. We're bringing in a combat veteran, a fighter pilot, somebody who dedicated a lot to this country. And I'm really interested in hearing from him. I'm really interested about his story, coming up in his career in the Navy, some of his deployments and his combat experience. Super excited about this show tonight. I appreciate everybody coming in here. Please like, comment, repost this live. Let's get some people in here and let's hear from this, this decorated veteran that I got in here tonight. Really nice person, and I think you guys are going to like to hear from him too. So without further ado, let's bring that kind warrior to the stage. Welcome, brother.
Hey, everybody. Great. How are you?
I'm good. Crazy night tonight, doing 2 shows back to back, so a little bit stressful, but this one I'm really excited about. Should be a pretty easy conversation, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. Super excited. Tom, a friend of both of ours, told me about you and some of the things that you had been through in the Navy, and I'm just super excited to hear about that, and I'm sure a lot of other people are too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Tom and I have been friends a really long time. So put my call sign was Fido in the Navy, so that's why I put it there. So kind of new to social media and all the other stuff. So he's kind of trying to teach me the ropes since you guys have been doing this for a while. You're like, yeah, I got this down. So
no worries.
But,
so tell us about Fido, man. Where'd that come from?
So Fido was my call sign. It was my first month in my Tomcat squadron. We were off the coast of San Diego doing workups before my first deployment. And it was cloudy. If those of you who've been to San Diego, there's a marine layer that comes in. This was, in the fall, I guess, right before we went on deployment, late summer, early fall. So we're out there. It's about 100 overcast off of San Diego. And I'm the last day cat shot for the first night landing. And then the second we go off the cat, all the displays in my airplane failed. So we had a HUD and displays in Tomcats back then. Even this was in 2002, I guess, early 2002. And then so launching off, I'm basically on a tiny little standby gyro. So for those of you who are not used to airplanes, I'm used to having a HUD and all kinds of displays and all kinds of toys, and then you go back to basically what you have in a Cessna to fly, a tiny little gyro that's hidden behind your left knee. So you're looking down over there to fly everything, and it's daytime, but you're just above a cloud layer. So flying around, just trying to do whatever I can to keep the shiny side up, basically. Flying around. my backseater, I'm like, hey, fix this stuff because there's nothing I can do about it. Everything that is broken has to do with the stuff that's in the back. He's got like 9 circuit breaker panels back there. For those of you who have seen the Top Gun movie, that's true. They had all these circuit breakers, and then there was one in the front too, but those didn't really pop very often, and there wasn't anything that I could do from the front. So basically, I'm just trying to fly, and then we're supposed to do the first night landing. So they decide they're going to bring me back to the ship, flying around for an hour and a half, and then coming as it's getting darker and darker. And then they bring me back aboard the ship, and I can't see anything. We go into the clouds. It's dark as we're coming down, and it's just pitch black dark outside, like it normally is landing on the carrier. It's like an inky black hole that you see, and I'm not seeing anything at all. Just flying on the instruments, flying on instruments, flying on instruments, getting talked all the way down, basically. First time I don't even see the ship. They wave me off, come back around. They hook me up for the people that are familiar with. They give me a short hook, which basically means that I intercept the ILS ship's ACLS, but it's just like a civilian instrument landing system, ILS. You intercept that at the same time, hit the glide slope and the azimuth. So I'm trying to intercept both of them at the same time instead of getting set up on the right path and then starting down where you're nice and stable. So I'm trying to basically just get the whole airplane stable. The LSOs see me, but I don't see them. So they call contact, and they're basically trying to help me fly my plane all the way down. I eventually trap, and I don't really care which wire I caught or anything at that point. And I honestly don't even remember which one I got. I was just happy that I stopped. I think it was the last one or something, but I don't know. We stopped. I'm on the carrier. I'm like, wow, it's really dark out here. So then I see the director. I put the wings back, turn off. They direct us to our parking spot. They chalk us and chain us and tie us down. And I reach up to my face and I'm like, shit. I'm like, my dark visor's still down. So I tell my backseater. He tells everybody else in the squadron that my visor was still down. It was dark outside with my dark visor down. So that's why I couldn't see anything. So I get FIDO for fucking dark outside from that. So I got to do it with that same kind of landing without my dark visor, and it wasn't much fun with the dark visor either. But so it's one of the most challenging landings I've ever had to do on the ship.
Yeah.
And that was like, I was completely brand new too. So just kind of task saturated.
Yeah, landing in the blind on something that is moving forward, right? It wasn't.
Yep.
It wasn't moving forward and also going with the waves too.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, that's next level.
Yeah, I got like 500 carrier landings in my whole career. And then I think I landed twice or 3 times and I never saw the carrier because it was fog or bad weather, like raining cats and dogs both. And I literally just fly instruments all the way to touchdown. So, and then I never see it. And it's weird rules on the ship. You have a landing safety officer, landing signals officer, actually. And LSO is what we call them. They're blind. They're one-eyed pickfuckers, we call them, because they're grading all of our landings, and obviously all my landings are great, just like every other pilot. But there are other pilots that are doing this too. But basically, you don't even think about what they tell you to do; you just do it. And their whole purpose is to keep us safe. And those guys saved my life on multiple occasions, so I give them all the credit, even though I still think they're blind. But that's kind of the whole military thing. We can give everybody crap, but hey, there's nobody else I really want to be there except for those guys. So
right, yeah.
Anyway, so that was my call sign. So FIDO.
Yeah, fuck, it's dark out. So talk to me about what made you want to join the Navy and then going into the academy and everything.
Yeah. So I was a small town boy. Basically, I grew up in a little town on the west coast of Florida, Crystal River. We had a nuclear power plant and manatees, but it was a great place to grow up. We had like lots of fishing. We go out in the boat and fishing and swimming and in the river all the time, doing outside stuff. We used to swim near alligators. They had a little nature park there, and they'd keep alligators, and they'd get out occasionally, and we'd be swimming with them and stuff. So they're like lizards; they don't really bother you. Just hanging out. But yeah, it was great. It was a great place to be. It's a small town. It's gotten bigger and bigger. Tampa's moved up to where I grew up, so like every other place around the country. But so that I started doing JRTC, which was like my big reservation was that I had to cut my hair because I had a mullet at that point. So long hair in the back and short in the front. And I'd have to cut my big mullet off. So my beautiful blonde locks were gone, never to be seen again, probably. So But anyway, so I started doing that, and I really liked it. So we had rifle teams, so we'd shoot little air rifles in our classroom and learn about the Navy and learn about all the different things that were going on. So from that, I was like, hey, what about the Naval Academy? They pay for your college and everything else. And I had fun doing that. At the time, I was going to be a Marine. Um, and really, almost all the way through the academy, that's kind of what I said. I was going to be a Marine. And I spent my last summer at the academy with them. And then I was like, they let you see all kinds of things with the academy. So you see submarines and ships and hang out with the SEALs. Got to go to Buds. That was kind of neat it was like a tour day. I didn't go to Buds, obviously. The SEAL training stuff. So it was like we were tourists getting a tour of Buds and watching the guys getting their training. And those guys have all my respect, man. Those guys are crazy, crazier than we are even. So, but love those guys. But anyway, so I got to see all the different sides of the Navy, and all the people that I met that flew airplanes all loved what they were doing. So you got to spend a long time, man. You got to spend 8 years after you get your wings. But I never met any pilot who didn't love flying and love what they're doing. So decided that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to do that more than be a Marine. So even though the Marine Corps, when I went my last summer, I got to go down to Cherry Point and fly in a Harrier in the back seat, obviously, and a Prowler, and then a C-130 riding around in the back of a C-130, which is yay. You're like vibrating around everywhere, but anyway, so I decided I wanted to fly. There are very few fighter guys at the Naval Academy because everybody's doing flying things, and you very rarely make it back there until maybe you're like an '06 or something like that, just because they need everybody doing flying things or things related to the Navy. So there's not a lot of off ramps to go and take time off and do that. But anyway, so went to flight school. So back in the day, you'd graduate, then have a whole summer off. So I graduated in '99, a long time ago, I guess. Over 25 years now, adds up fast.
Right.
So got to be a sailing instructor for the summer. So basically, you spend your whole time, you're studying and getting ready and everything, and then you're like, just chill out for the whole summer. All you got to do is show up and teach a bunch of midshipmen how to sail in a tiny little sailboat. Show up and then ride my bike to work and chill out, have your own apartment, and pretend you're a real human again.
Was
No
that on
one's run.
Constellation or?
That was at the Naval Academy. So they teach right when people join the Naval Academy, they teach them how to sail. So they take them. We just take them sailing these little 20-foot knockabouts, like 5 or 6 of them. Just
Oh,
sail around the little bay there, and then do that twice a day. So show up at like 8, finish by 11 or so, go get some lunch until 1, come back, do it again, and repeat that for your whole summer. You're like the easiest job ever. Um, but uh, but it was good. It was a good way to kind of relax, and the most tan I've ever been. I'm like the whitest white person in the entire world, uh, but the one time I've ever been more tan than my wife um, was that summer. But uh, but I tried not to get burned any more than I was. So. But that was pretty awesome. And then flight school, right? So then they send you down to flight school. They send you to Pensacola. You do like 9 weeks of basic classes, which I didn't think were hard at all. So you do swimming. They make you swim a mile. We did the dunker thing, the thing that you'd see on Officer and a Gentleman. If you guys have seen that movie, we were like one of the last people to do that Dilbert dunker thing where it flips you upside down. It had to do the Helo dunker too, which sucks worse than the little Dilbert dunker. Um, like they have a new one now, but the old school one is like flips you upside down and then water goes all up your nose and people are kicking you in the face, even though they tell you not to kick. So you're just trying to survive and get out. You have to do that like every 4 years. That was like your first little thing you did. And then what else did you do? We took some classes on like aerodynamics and basic weather and things like that that you need to know as a pilot. But it was kind of like the last little weeding out process. Like it was shocking, but like one dude showed up and then they tell you they're going to give you a PT test. So you're going to do the standard Navy PT test. Guy shows up and doesn't pass that. Then we do swimming the next day. He fails the swimming test. Then he fails the first academic test. You're like, dude, what did you come here for? But I mean, I guess that's why they do it is like, no matter what, sometimes people will show up and you're like, why are you here? And what are you trying to do? So, um, but that guy was gone after that, never to be seen again. Not surprising. Um, and
and
then, so yeah.
and then you guys go like SEER school or something, or is
Hmm.
that after flight?
It's after, well, you can do it, but they'll do that after you get your wings sometime. It's usually before you do your first deployment. So I spent my first wedding anniversary at SEER school. So survival, evasion, resistance, escape. It's the simulated prisoner of war camp. We did it up in Maine. I had a fun size pack of M&Ms to eat on my first wedding anniversary, so that was not recommended. I could think of a billion other ways I'd rather spend my first wedding anniversary than running around the woods with people chasing me, basically, and having nothing to eat except for the bag that I'd saved from the one MRE they gave us like 3 days before. So that wasn't a very.
For that one?
What's that?
Has she forgiven you for that one?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't my choice. They orders are orders, right? So I didn't really have a choice in the matter. But yeah, so we got married while I was down in flight school. So went to flight school and then basically went down. I went to Corpus Christi, so Pensacola and Corpus Christi for the Navy for basic flying. So we were flying little T-34s, which is like a Beechcraft Bonanza turboprop. So it's still got like 500 horsepower. Now they moved to like I think T6s or something, even more power. Probably more airplane than brand new guys need. So they're teaching them basic how to fly. So you're doing like basic flying, how to fly, how to land, how to fly formation, basic instrument flying. You start, and then went to that's where you select like jets, props, or helos in the Navy. So you had to be in the top half to get selected to go to jets, which is all the fast, cool stuff. And then props and helos. So there's actually more helicopter pilots than there are any other kind in the Navy. You have 2 pilots in every helicopter, only 1 pilot in the fighters, and then just as many heavy prop kind of airplanes. So these days, P-8, which is a 737, or they used to do P-3s as well, and some C-130s in the Navy, just a few of them. They could do those as well. And then, so I got jets, and then I went down to Kingsville, so I moved down the road. Let's see, you start that, so then you learn fighter, you learn base, you do the same kind of things you did in but now you're going twice as fast in a little jet trainer, a little single engine jet T-45s. So now you're doing 300 knots where you're doing 100, 150 knots everywhere. So your brain has to move that much faster. So it's like snap, 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 that much faster. Things that would make you like 50 feet off altitude, and the other one will make you 500 feet off altitude in a jet, and they still care if you're not on the right altitude or where you're supposed to be. So it's a big step up in speed as well as fast thinking and everything else. So jets, it's one of those dangerous business that it's always going to be dangerous. Things happen faster than you can ever imagine. Like we also did mishap investigations at one point, and we had 2 guys that hit each other head on in a midair. And basically they have, both of them are doing about 600 knots true airspeed each. So they're doing 1,200 knots at each other straight ahead. So when they're about a little over a mile away, there was nothing maneuvering that either jet could do to not hit each other. That's how like crazy how fast you're coming at each other. And they just didn't see each other and ran into each other. So my buddy's jet saw it the last second and pulled up. The other jet hit the underside. It broke their jet in half. The guy that hit them was a student, and it killed him instantly. My buddy was in the back seat. He was one of my first roommates on the ship. He ejected. They think him and the pilot talked about it. Is the story he told me. Like they think they both pulled the handle, but they don't know because it literally broke their jet in half, and now they're in the cockpit part, and the rest of it, who knows where it went. They eject. The guy in the front seat was fine. His parachute worked fine, and he landed. My buddy, his parachute worked fine too, but he landed like on a huge rock, and it did a complex fracture of his lower leg. So it was out in the desert in California, and so he ended up losing his leg from that, and not really flying anymore after that. So rough deal, as it always is. We would lose. So the Navy crashes there's usually 3 to 5 plane crashes a year, and about 50% fatal. It's kind of an easy round number sake. Cost of doing business, $100 million a piece. So it's huge money, but it's just kind of crazy how that goes. Like a buddy told me once, he's like, if you didn't do $1 million worth of damage, it's not even worth talking about. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, pretty much everything in those jets is a Class A, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's $2 million now. They keep increasing the money and everything else. So, or something like that. I think it's $2 million. Maybe they changed it since I retired. But either way, it's like, it's not hard to do $1 million worth of damage on a fighter airplane. So you run into something or do something, or all kinds of crazy stuff happens. But
yeah. So you go through all your training and stuff, and then do you get stationed on a carrier next? Is that?
So once you get, so you go through flight school, right? So then got married while I was there. Then my wife was like crying when we first got there. They gave me a little time off. We had a quick honeymoon, a week in Charlotte, I think, or something, and then back to flying right away. And then she cried on the way to South Texas where we were because she was in the middle of nowhere. Went back. So then you get winged. So then you get your wings, and at that point you pick what kind of airplane you're going to fly. So you know you're going to fly jets. So at the time it was regular Hornets, Super Hornets, F-14s, or Prowlers were the choices that we had out of the people that selected jets. So it's like you're whittling down the selection. So, and I got Tomcats, so I felt like super lucky to get Tomcats. The newest, latest, greatest thing was a Super Hornet back then, but the Tomcat community was like amazing. We went to Key West on a det. You go to the aircraft carrier in the training airplane, and we ended up going down to fly some of our fighter kind of maneuvering flights for training flights down in Key West. And they had a couple Tomcats that were down there. I didn't know they were broken, but they were in the hangar because they were broken. But it's still like a huge fighter, right? The weight of a Tomcat is like 76,000 pounds max, so it's gigantic as an airplane goes, for especially for a fighter airplane. Over 20,000 pounds of gas with the tanks installed. So we had a lot of gas. Goes super fast. Everything moves. The wings move. It has an intake ramp that adjusts for the speed. So when the plane and the wings automatically would sweep back and forth normally. You could make them so that they stayed forward or make them so they stayed back, but then you have to pay attention to them.
Yeah.
But generally they'd be auto until we'd leave them and when we'd come into land a lot of times and sweep them back and then sweep them back forward halfway through landing. But
yeah, for everybody that's watching, that's like the original Top Gun. That's what they were flying on.
Yeah. I got a model somewhere. I don't know. Somewhere around here. I think I got one. Oh yeah. Tomcats. Yeah. This thing. The big fighter. Yeah, so the wings move, everything moves. This was my squadron, so it was a toy, but it was kind of cool because it was my same squadron. So I thought it was pretty awesome. So it's got my whole like call signs and everything else. And then we could carry all kinds of missiles on the bottom. So you could carry like 6 Phoenix missiles, which were pretty large and could go pretty far. All that stuff is probably still classified, even though we don't even have that missile anymore. So, and the Tomcats been long gone either. Since like 2006, Tomcats have been gone. But it was a cool airplane to fly too. So we had tons of gas and we could fly around for a long time. I flew the newest version of it. Like they had A, B, and D. The C, I don't know what happened to it. Other Tomcat guys will probably correct me on that, why we don't have a C, but we had A, B, and D Tomcats, but we had all the toys in the Ds, so we had all the HUD and displays and all the other stuff. It was like they upgraded everything, and I flew that version. We had a few squadrons of those, and our squadron went away, and then the other two were the last two Tomcat squadrons that they had. It was mostly for parts support because they only made so many parts. So then if they're going to keep them around, they'd use one squadron. They had plenty of parts that they'd have to make more as they were already planning for them to go away. But anyway, so that's Tomcats. So you finish flight school and then go to Tomcats. You go to the Tomcat Training Squadron, which was in Oceana, which is in Virginia Beach. So moved to Virginia Beach. So my wife was super happy to be moving to a big city instead of living in nowhere land. And so we get to Oceana, and then you spend about a year there learning how to fly Tomcats. So you start out with the basics again, except for now you're in a fleet fighter airplane, and now everything is bigger and faster, and now you got wings and all kinds of stuff. And although there's 2 people that sit in a Tomcat, there's only one set of flight controls in any F-14. They couldn't put a set of flight controls in the back at all. So the guy in the back, he has a bunch of circuit breakers and stuff, but there is no stick and throttles, and he can't control where the airplane goes. His only option would be to eject himself from the plane. It's his only way to leave or control really what it's doing. There's some weird things that they could do a little bit of stuff, but generally everything's controlled from the front. They'd put a pilot, you'd put a pilot in the back seat for your first flight. Usually the person who did your check ride to say that you're safe to fly the airplane for your very first flight. And then they'd do one more time where there was a pilot that had to sit in the back seat. They would do like a maneuvering flight to show you how to do fighter maneuvering. And they would do a flight, and then you would repeat the same flight that they did to teach you. They could show you how to do it, and then you could go do the exact same thing, so you knew how to maneuver the plane like they wanted you to. But both of those flights were super chill because pilots hate sitting in the back and not being in control. And it was not one of the favorite flights for instructors. a super thorough simulator check, and then very relaxed, chill first flight, basically with a pilot. It's your first time flying from like a 15,000, 16,000 pounds, something like that. I don't even remember exactly, but somewhere around that neighborhood. Trainer jet to a 60,000 pound fighter airplane. That's actually a fighter with all kinds of cool toys too. Um, so it was a again, it's another big step up, and they're teaching you how to do that. And then you go through all that stuff. You do learn how to drop bombs, how you do it in the fleet for real. You learn how fighter maneuvering, all that kind of stuff, dropping bombs, more formation flying, and everything else. Because everything you do in fighters, you're flying in formations and stuff. You go to the ship again, but this time you go at night. Um, I didn't ever have to actually set foot on an aircraft carrier until I finished my Tomcat carrier qualifications. So I finished doing all of it, and I did all of it from shore, which almost never happens. And then as soon as it ended, they're like, "You're qualled," and then they said, "All right, you're shutting down." So they chained us and shut us down, and then I got stuck on the ship for like a week and a half, or maybe it wasn't quite that long, but I was stuck for a week, and then finished that. Got back. So we found a ride off the ship like a week later almost because we got stuck there. We didn't have anything to do, but there was no way to get off of the ship. We were off the coast. We finally got a ride back home to Oceana on the COD, which is an E2 or a C2, sorry. It's like a prop plane that has seats in the back. They bring passengers out to the ship on it. Get back home. I literally get home, take a shower, and my phone rings, and it's the commanding officer of the training squadron, the FRS. We called him Mother because there's a whole trophy. He was a great dude, slammer. Still see him at Tailhook sometimes. But anyway, my phone rings, and me, rag student, never talks to the CO of the squadron, but he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" He's like, "I just got back from the ship." He's like, "So I need you to come in." So he's like, "I got good news and bad news. Like, the good news is you're going to sea. The bad news is you leave on Monday, and this is Friday afternoon." So basically, like, I'm home, and then I'm going back to sea the next day. He's like, "We're gonna do a quick winging ceremony later this afternoon. We're gonna give you your wings, and then Monday you guys are on the ship." Me and one other guy. So we head out to the ship, and then that was my first month in the squadron. So back to sea with my squadron. That's when I got my call sign in that first month, out there flying Tomcats off the coast of San Diego. And then you go from the training squadron, and then now you're in a fleet squadron. So they give you a whole bunch more stuff. So now you've finished the training in the RAG, which just makes you just barely passable how to fly. And then they throw a whole bunch more stuff at you. So now you got laser guided bombs and FLIRs and secure radios and all kinds of stuff that you never had before, and a bunch of other toys that are classified you can't talk about, that they kind of didn't at the time have there. So again, it's a whole nother learning curve of stuff. And you're also trying to learn how to be a qualified combat wingman instead of just a wingman in the RAG. So we did that. And then kind of finished that kind of stuff. And then we were on deployment again after a little bit of training. Basically get home, go home, and then off we go on deployment. So very little time at home.
You know, it's funny because for a little while I was doing some interviews with World War II veterans, and how similar the pipeline still is for all of them. Like it's the exact same. Like they did the same thing. That you go to school, you're down to your training, you're getting your airframe, you're getting more certifications, and then bam, you're on deployment. Like it's very similar to what you just said. It's crazy that, and we have a good system. We have the best pilots in the world. So obviously there's a reason to keep it the same. And it's just funny for me to hear you talk about it, because I don't, it's a little bit different for helicopters. But for you, it's very similar to the bomber pilots that I was talking from World War II. Exactly the same. Like if you could be talking about their training or whatever, because you guys are saying the exact same thing, the way things happened or whatever, it's exact same.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's a reason why it does it, but it's also like you don't realize it, but you're trying to kill the senior pilots, because you really just have no idea. Like you have the super fast, capable airplane, and you know how to use it, but hey, you got so much to learn at this point. So, and then that's the most amazing thing about aviation and naval aviation specifically is you always get thrown in just a little bit more than you can handle no matter what. So you're always either learning or you're teaching somebody something. And that never changed my entire 20 years. You're either teaching someone how to do something or you are learning something about something. And a lot of times you're doing both at the same time. Even when you think you have it down, there's always a new thing or a new toy or a new something that we do. And I was a test guy too. So I was a test pilot in the Navy after, later on that we'll get to. So it was always like test flying and all kinds of different stuff.
Yep. So you make it through your training. You've
Yep.
got your airframe. Now you're going to a carrier to deploy.
Yep. Yeah. So I was on the Constellation. So it's a non-nuke carrier for those of you who are familiar with carriers, CV-64. So it's a Connie. It was interesting living on the ship because like I said, I hadn't hardly ever been on a ship. You had to bring a bucket with you and fill up your bucket with water because you had no idea when the water might stop. And depending on which head you went to, the water coming out of the shower could either be ice cold or it could be steam, literal steam, because the showers individually were heated with steam. So you had a steam heater in each one, and it wasn't really adjustable. There was like a temperature setting, but that was just to make you feel better about yourself, that you thought you might be able to change the temperature. So you got good at either you'd fill up the bucket of water because there's nothing worse than having shampoo head or a soapy butt, and you have to walk around the whole day because they shut off the water for the whole day, and now you're walking around with soap up your butt the whole day because you don't have any water to wash it off. Shower shoes, the drain sometimes would back up and you don't want to know about brown trout coming up on these showers and stuff like that on them. So, or what possibly could be there. And there were no women on my ship, by the way, too. So, for my first deployment. So, it was a completely different world when you had no women of any kind on the ship. And love our women and women. My personal opinion about this whole women in the military and everything else, women in the military can do everything that men can do. They don't have the strength because natural strength, men are generally stronger and faster in those things. So when you get down to like SEALs and special forces and stuff like that, I don't know if they can do that just on the physical strength and stamina part of it alone. But as far as flying airplanes and everything else, women are just as good at it than men. The differences are that now it's one more thing you have to deal with. So, because turns out women like men and men like women. So, and when you have all dudes, you mostly didn't have to deal with men liking women and women liking men as much. But when you put men and women together in their 20s and their 30s, guess what? That you're trying to fight hormones and fight everything else on both sides. So it's just one more thing you had to deal with. My first deployment, we didn't have women. We got women in our squadron. And our senior enlisted female was taking liberties with our young airmen in the E Club, dirty dancing in front of the whole squadron. And she's supposed to be the senior enlisted female. So she ends up going to captain's mast and she was gone. So we didn't have a senior enlisted female for a while. And then we had some crazy old stories too, like our crazy old Master Chief. Um, he'd be coming over and he'd be like, "Sir, come look at my girlfriend." And he'd have this like the biggest, fattest, naked chick on his computer screen that you could possibly imagine. You're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm blind." So you're like, "Master Chief, come on." He's like, "Sir, don't stop making fun of my girlfriend." So
for everybody that's listening,
anyway, sorry.
Captain's mast is the courtroom on the ship, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's non-judicial punishment. So in the military, you could always request trial by court martial, but you'd be insane because if you get convicted, it's a felony. Or you could do non-judicial punishment, which is captain's mast or office hours or Article 32, whichever one you wanted to call it, all the same thing. And then in the Navy, we called it captain's mast. And then basically, there's still serious consequences there. They can give you an administrative separation. They can take money away from people. At the time, we could give guys bread and water. So on the ship. And we had a couple guys that we gave bread and water to, and he's like, they came out changed, where you spend 2 weeks of your life and you get Wonder Bread and water, and they're in a little room that you can't even fully stand up in, and they're getting vitamins, and that's it. And they came out, those guys were changed when they came out of that experience. So it's a rough thing, but sometimes people, young kids need to grow up. So, and it is the military, so there's no like baby steps or any of that stuff, right? So you're a man or a woman, and you're responsible for your own actions, and you'll be held accountable for your own actions. So, and you can't quit. That's the one thing. So, if you think you can, you signed up. So,
Yeah,
uh,
for sure. So you're on your carrier, you're going to your first deployment. Where were you heading?
yep. So first deployment, we knew we were going to Iraq. So basically, first deployment on the Connie, we crossed the Pacific. We were out of San Diego. So go out to San Diego, join the boat, uh, and then stop in Hawaii for a couple days. We Where else did we go? I think we went to Hong Kong and Singapore on the way out, and then straight to the Gulf. So we're Southern Watch is still going on. This is 2002, late fall, I think, summer fall, something like that. As we're crossing, and then we're in the Gulf doing Southern Watch missions over Iraq. So basically, they do a no-fly zone over southern Iraq, and there was a no-fly zone over northern Iraq, and we were enforcing that. There was still this huge, and there was this huge buildup of forces that was happening along this time too. We are kind of there before most of the other people had gotten there, flying those. So the Iraqis, we would fly reconnaissance, or we'd fly like interdiction or things like that to make sure that they don't fly. Sometimes we'd be air to air before Iraq started, and sometimes we'd be air to ground support, where you'd have some bombs and things too, just to watch what's going on. But largely, it was not usually missions where you would fly around and you wouldn't get shot at as much in Iraq during Southern Watch. The Iraqis would shoot AAA at you occasionally, and then they'd shoot at you, and you'd see it, and you'd report it, and then we would blow up these little cable boxes to force the Iraqis to talk over digital means that we could monitor easier. So think about blowing up your cell phones and stuff like that. So we would bomb a lot of those, and we'd get to bomb those little. You're bombing a telephone box out in the middle of somewhere. And then now they got to go to that. So that's what it started out as. So that forces it so we can monitor what they're doing a little easier. So that's largely what was happening at that point. There was always this threat that the Iraqis would launch a Su-25, which is a Foxbat. It's a really fast Soviet fighter. They get a Mach 2.5, slightly faster than a Tomcat, which ours was 2.4. But realistically, they were a plane that could go really, really fast in a straight line, and then they would turn around. But they were kind of the most capable airplanes. They had MiG-29s in there too. But the big threat was that they actually did. They would wait, and we'd do Southern Watch missions, and there'd be a whole bunch of airplanes, Air Force F-15s, and us, and a bunch of other people flying around during Southern Watch. And they would wait till all the fixed wing planes leave. They would use the ATC radars that were in Kuwait, not Kuwait, in just right in Basra, just north of Iraq. They would use the air traffic control radars to make sure that all of our fixed wing fighter airplanes are out of there. Meanwhile, you got the Predator flying like super slow. It trucks its way up there for several hours before we all get there, and then it trucks its way back south. And then they would wait till we leave, and they would try and dart in, make a mad dash, and try and shoot that thing down, and then run back north. And they actually managed to do it at one point. So shot down the Predator. It was like news at the time because they shot down our Predator airplane. No real threat to us. They were running away.
So this is go ahead. So this is
2002.
2002. Okay. Yeah, because I was there 2003, 2004.
Yep.
Like after the initial invasion or whatever, I was up in Mosul, Key West areas where I was. So
yep. Yeah, I was there. That's where I was on the ground much later, but at the time we were doing Southern stuff. So that happened. Christmas Day, we'd also do reconnaissance missions, like photo reconnaissance. We had a photo reconnaissance pod. So they'd have all these areas that you weren't supposed to fly over in this, even that, because that's where the concentrations of Iraqi troops were. And they would definitely shoot at you if you flew through those areas. And it was like, we don't want to fly there and let them shoot at us unnecessarily when we know we're just going to do that, even though it's Southern Watch and they're not supposed to shoot at us and all that stuff, but they would. But when we do photo reconnaissance, we'd fly the most direct route all through all those stuff. Don't fly through this area. Don't fly through that area. They would plot the most direct route through all of them, and they would always shoot AAA at you during those missions. I did one Christmas Day in '02 before the Iraqi freedom kicked off, basically. But we knew it was coming, so it was ramping up, and all the forces are arriving, and we were the only ones flying on Christmas Day because it was Christmas. So we went out there, fly through. A whole bunch of AAA was being shot at us, like the closest they ever got to me. So we would fly like about a mile away from each other, me and my flight lead, because I was still a wingman back then. And it was like splitting us, co-altitude with us, closer to me than him. So like bursts of AAA. So think 60 millimeter artillery pieces, way bigger than what you guys would see on the ground. You're not talking like a dude with a rifle. You're talking like an artillery piece.
Right.
Something like bigger, twice as big as what a Bradley shoots, really. So 60 and 100 millimeter is the only thing that could reach up as high as we were, and they're timed and altitude. They set altitude, so we'd stay off of even altitudes and that stuff. But when we were taking pictures, we'd have to fly straight and level for a period of time just to take the pictures to make the cameras point in the right direction and everything.
Yeah.
So they would shoot at us then.
So you guys, were you there for the kickoff of the war?
Yep, we were there for the kickoff of the war. So I was the junior pilot. So what I didn't know is that if the Iraqis had decided they were going to turn on all of the air defense systems, and we don't care if we are going to suck up a bunch of missiles, that they might have been able to shoot down one or multiple different airplanes. So it was all senior guys on the very first night, but I was on the mission planning team. So I literally had a map with all the different strikes of what's going to happen. So the air tasking order, the ATO. So I knew when the Tomahawks were going to hit, when the B2s were going to bombs and what their targets were, where they were, all that stuff, right? So you had all access to all that stuff as part of the strike planning team, because we're all one big team. Obviously, all this stuff is really classified and not everybody has access to everything. It's a need to know thing. But since our squadron guys were overhead downtown Baghdad, night one of Iraqi freedom, that whole, like when you see all that AAA going off everywhere, actually one of the pictures I don't know posted on here, but it was Baghdad at night, and it was that night that another guy in our squadron took through NVGs before they started really shooting. He's like, hey, I should probably put this away now that we're getting close to getting shot at. And then tons of AAA going off everywhere. They didn't really know what they were shooting at most of the time because they were afraid to turn on their radars. And they were like, we'd have anti-radiation homing missiles. So if they turned on a radar, it would lock onto them and then blow up with like 1,000-pound warhead on top of their radar site. Bombs going off everywhere. And we also knew where the TV cameras were because we were watching CNN and Fox News just like everybody else was back then. So, but we knew where they were located. So we had it on our map. And then we knew where the whole shock and awe thing, we knew where those Tomahawks were going to hit, where these B2 bombs were going to hit, and the time that they were going to hit to the second. CNN's tape delayed about 2 to 3 minutes or something like that. So we had basically real-time battle damage assessment of exactly where the bombs were, how effective they were, because their cameras are showing it everywhere. So we're just sitting there watching this thing happen from the ship, and I'm sitting there watching all this stuff happen. And at first we weren't sure if everybody's going to come back because we were not talking to those guys at that point. I'm just on the ship. And then you have the Iraqi information minister. I don't know if you guys ever saw that dude. He'd be like, we shot all of them down. He's like, all those guys, no one came back. They're running away from us. As guys are rounding Baghdad basically at the end of the war. You're like, they're literally at the gates of Baghdad and you said they're running them off. So we're like, oh, it was our entertainment value for a few weeks after that. So I flew like a couple days later, and then we were dropping 2,000-pound bombs and 1,000-pound bombs. So we had fixed targets for a while. As soon as the war started, since we could carry bombs, we didn't do any air-to-air stuff at all. It was all just bombs because we could carry them. And we also had gas. Tankers were the limiting factor on what we could do, how much airborne gas we could do, because planes coming from a long distance. The Iraqis were so afraid of us that they were literally burying their airplanes with bulldozers about night 2, so that we wouldn't bomb their airplanes, and that they would have something left after we got out of there. So about a weekend, they took the air-to-air missiles largely off of our plane. So we had long-range air-to-air missiles on the plane when we started. But then it was like, hey, there is no air-to-air threat for us. And there were F-15s that were flying around as well that could not drop bombs at the time. So those guys, they would go and fly around Iraq, but there's no air threat. So they had nothing else to do. And there's plenty of gas in Kuwait and Saudi both, but they would never have tankers because they weren't the priority. They're there, and obviously if we have that capability, we're going to keep launching them. They're already there. But there wasn't any real need. So those guys ended up just doing a bunch of capping and going home, staying out of the where everything, they weren't on the front lines. They would be back where it was safer, kind of around the tankers and stuff.
So what was your mindset? Like what was the like, how was everybody feeling on the ship? Like what were you guys like? Were you guys psyched? Like, you guys were putting your skills to the test. Like, this is the real
Oh
deal.
yeah.
When
Oh yeah.
I talk about
Yeah.
like crew chiefs, like when they finally get like the weapons free thing, a lot of them are like very like, oh my god, I can really, like, this is really happening. A lot of them like are, it's kind of surreal almost. You've been training, shooting at ranges and stuff like that, and now when there's other humans on the other side, like it's kind of a surreal moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's different. I mean, when you drop a bomb on a moving tank, there's three, four, five guys at least in that moving vehicle, and they're going to cease to exist the second that bomb hits them because they don't even know it's coming, probably. Um, and you could tell that they don't know it's coming. And then when you and your wingman, we would usually have 4 or 6 bombs. I think it was four usually. Um, Four in the tunnel, and I think we'd put one on the cheek station. I don't remember. But either way, I mean, when the two of you show up, each one of those bombs is taking out an armored vehicle. So you're basically making an Iraqi tank company go away completely just with 2 airplanes. And then you multiply that by the 44 airplanes on a carrier times 3 carriers that are out there times uh, F-117s and V-2s. You're like, and then all the guys on the ground. I mean, we were talking about before, like the Iraqi invasion kicking off. We knew where all the guys were. So for the first couple days, we did deep strike missions. We bombed Saddam's palaces with. It was cool watching the 2,000-pound bombs hitting like one after another, GPS guided bombs, and seeing them like hitting this gigantic palace complexes, leveling all their command and control and communications. That's kind of the first things that would happen, and all their air defenses, their primary air defenses. So we're taking out all that stuff night one, basically. Their airfields, their runways, you name it, all that stuff went away day one, night one. And then we had some deep strike missions.
Oh, we lost him there. All right. Well, we'll try and get him back up here. Hopefully he can come back on. Yeah, it's just hearing him talk about that, and thinking about the Venezuela strike too that just happened. Kind of similar thing. The precision, the technology, and the level of training or whatever within our U.S. military is just second to none. And that's it's just it's like there's no other military that's comparable to ours. And the way that they decimated the Iraqi military, and then also same with
Sorry about that.
no worries, no worries, no worries. I just kept talking. I was just talking about like, how, you talking about that or whatever, and then seeing the Venezuela strike the other night or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Very similar, like very precise. Very, they took out like, when you have a clear objective, when you have a like, a clear mission or whatever, like you guys did at that point or whatever, then granted things drug on, and the muddy, the water got muddied or whatever. But the thing is like, when you have a clear mission, clear objective or whatever, there is no military in the world that can handle things like the U.S. military. And you guys, you're talking just about that. It's just like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was exactly the same, right? Watching the strikes that happened there, you see Hugo Chavez's memorial going up in flames, and you're like, hey, guess what? Those are TAC Air airplanes taken out with bombs. Could be B-2s, could be, I mean, and the Iran strikes as well. We had plans to do all that kind of stuff even way back when. So contingency plans for how we were going to go take out their nuclear program and that kind of stuff. So political reasons never happened for whatever reason. Not saying we should or shouldn't do whatever we're going to do. But all throughout my whole career, it's never been a matter of our military not being good. It's our political will, our planning, our decision making of what we're going to do. And at the same time, there's only so much you can do. Are we willing to commit hundreds of thousands of our own American sons and daughters to something when we know they're going to be in a place where someone can shoot at them if they're on the ground? We can do deep strikes and destroy things and make their lives. We hit a hell of a lot harder than any other country in the whole world, and they're going to know it. But the political will and the follow up and running a country are completely foreign and different things. I mean, you saw it in the army. Like, are you guys the police? I don't think so.
Right.
But in some ways in Iraq, we ended up doing that kind of. We actually had, we called them the lepers when I was in Iraq with the army because they were LEPs, law enforcement professionals. They had this old retired cop dudes because a lot of the stuff we were doing, trying to find bomb makers and terrorists and all kinds of idiots, were the same as police work. I don't
Yeah.
know. You said you're in Mosul, so it was all like city of 1.2 million people, and it was all like it was a medieval country, so we had medieval solutions. So we literally dug a trench around the whole city with bulldozers. So you have a big trench on one side and a big berm on the other side where all that stuff is. Set up checkpoints, so they got to go there. So you literally have a wall of dirt that's all around there, and then the bad guys had pushed that dirt in, and they'd go around the checkpoints. And you're like, imagine that we'd search every one of the vehicles that we saw cutting the checkpoints and stuff, and found some bad people too. So
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that I learned, I deployed 5 times, and Iraq, Afghanistan. I did a tour in Saudi Arabia too with the National Guard fighting the Houthis. But the thing that that I've come to learn after doing this for so many years, over 20 years for me, was that we're not good at nation building. Like we're never like those places will never be America. So we're
yeah.
very good. We're very good at striking. We're very good at taking out objectives, taking out targets and stuff like that. But we're not in the business of building. Like we don't know how to build nations and stuff like that. And so hopefully I've seen lately from President Trump or whatever, we're kind of getting away from that. We're not going in. We do military strikes or whatever, and then we're not in the business of building up other nations because it's not going to work. They have to do it from within. Like those places will never be America. Iran will never be America. Venezuela will never be America. They have to do it from within. And so yeah, you take out the dictator, do the military strikes or whatever, but the rebuilding part, it's up to that country. They have to do it themselves. Otherwise it just ends up worse than it was before. Iraq is just like it's not any better than it was under Saddam, and it wasn't under Saddam either. And so it's just it's just a terrible place. And Syria too. Syria is just even worse. When they took out Assad or whatever, I'm not a fan of Assad, but the thing is when you do that, ISIS is going to take over, and it's just going to be even worse than it was before, and we're kind of seeing that now. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did the same thing. So it was like the same kind of thing that we saw over and over again from my time in Iraq, time in Afghanistan, everything else. I was on the ground in Iraq. I spent 9 months with the army in Mosul, all of 07, I guess. So basically with them, and then
Mosul has a distinct smell. It has like this muddy like there's this river, like, and there's
the Euphrates goes right through there. Yeah.
It just has this very distinct smell. I've been there a million times, but yeah, and I'll never forget it. But so you did the initial
so we did our initial Iraqi freedom. So we did that. So we basically about the time that Bush came on and declared victory in Iraq, that was the time we were headed home. So lots of bombs. We were following the strikes up, supporting guys on the ground. And then all the way through the capture of Baghdad and everything else, they still were looking for Saddam and everything. And then it was like, hey, we're calling it mission complete and we're going home. So it's like, all right, we're going home after all that kind of stuff. Got to get shot at, fly over Baghdad, all kinds of stuff. They'd shoot SAMs at us. They were afraid to guide them, but they certainly get your attention because they'll go up to like 50, 60, 100,000 feet. They'd come up to our altitude and then you'd see them come up and you could tell if they're guiding or not. we're looking out for them visually, because they had all these science project kind of missiles. They would try and put different guidance systems on them because they were afraid to turn on their systems. And we're high enough most of the time that the passive systems aren't going to work as well, and their capabilities. Just where we were, but you're still trying to keep your head on a swivel because if it doesn't have any warning system or something that you know it's coming at you, then it's literally you seeing it can save your life, and it's the missile or bullet you don't see is the one that's going to kill you, not the one that you see coming most of the time. Because we can maneuver a lot and do all kinds of stuff, but if you don't see it and you fly in a straight line the whole time, then most missiles can track your airplane and shoot you down. So, but
Right.
we'd do that. So you'd see they'd shoot SAMs at us and stuff, SA2s and SA6s mostly, SA3s as well. But they were afraid to turn on the guidance radars for those things, because they would suck up a harm, and we would definitely make them pay for turning on the radar as well at the time. So it wasn't like just them being dumb. It's like, yeah, they were going to suck up a lot of carnage if they decided they wanted to try and do that, throughout the whole war kind of thing. And it's the same as it is today, right? So they can use their capabilities too, but we're going to make them pay for it if they want to try and do different things. And I'm not saying that they're going to succeed either. So it depends on what kind of systems they have. But you're stupid if you're not paying attention and you're not trying to do the best you can, or you're also just probably going to get shot down if you're just assuming no one can shoot me down ever. So that's that kind of hubris doesn't go well. You still have to look out for all the capable and not so capable systems.
So you
Some of
did,
those missiles in Vietnam.
yeah. So you did how many tours in Iraq?
So I did, let me think. So my first cruise, we went there. Second cruise, my second cruise, we were supposed to go back to Iraq and do some stuff there. I think we did go back a little bit, but mostly we did tsunami relief. So we were in Hong Kong for Christmas on my second deployment. We'd gotten back in Tomcats. They declared victory. We turned over our Tomcats. We transitioned to Super Hornets. Got new airplanes flying the same, like brand new out of the factory floor, smelling like a new car kind of airplanes. But they were brand new that they didn't have all the capabilities that we had in our Tomcats because they're still building them. The Tomcats went away largely because they were too expensive to maintain, not because of the capabilities they had, because they had more capabilities than the planes that replaced them at the time. I wouldn't say that today because, I mean, a lot of time has gone by, like 20 years. So you can't really say that the planes they're flying today are not as capable. They might not have as much gas in some cases and range and things like that and some capabilities, but there's a lot more to airplanes sometimes. And technology moves on too. Uh, but at the time, so we traded those airplanes. We moved from Oceana in Virginia Beach to Lemoore, California, in the promised land out there in the Central Valley, where we have Thule fog, which also comes in and it just sits over there. Like it gets super thick fog and everything else. But that's where the Navy's West Coast fighter base is still today. So they have F-35s and F-18s largely there, Super Hornets all now. So that's where we moved off to, got brand new Super Hornets, did more training to learn how to fly that airplane. Same mission, but a new airplane. So you're learning all the systems. It's got different engines and different systems and things like that. So that's like a year. And then all the maintainers have to learn how to maintain the airplane too. So those guys actually took longer than we did to go through training. So some of the technicians, like the electronics technicians and those guys and ordies and things like that, a lot of those guys would take a long time to go through their schools to learn the different systems. And those guys left even early from our deployment to learn that because some of their schools took so long. Because it's not just pilots, right? You want to talk to guys like me that were flying the airplanes, but behind every one of those airplanes is 20 maintainers, basically, at least, that are maintaining each one of those airplanes. So they're the guys that are doing the work. They're the guys that are working 12 on, 12 off for day in, day out, day in, day out, to keep those planes flying. And those guys deserve all the credit in the world for everything they did. So, and they're experts too. So those guys go deployment, deployment, deployment all the time. And couldn't do it without them. So, and the service that they have. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, they say in the Army they say a college degree to break a plane or helicopter in that case. high school diploma to fix it. So
Yep, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times there's more to the story, and like, I mean, the good thing about being a fighter pilot, right? You get kind of instant respect because the whole like, I mean, it's dangerous. And when I look back and I can count on both hands, guys that I knew that aren't with us anymore, and you're like, wow, okay, those are all names that I know, or guys that are in crashes, um, and that have serious injuries or just dead. And um, the first crash that I ever had was when I was in advanced. This guy, it was in our sister squadron, not in my squadron, but we were like right next to each other. It was an instructor, and I forget the guy, but he wasn't a pilot. He was a guy that was in the back seat, just riding along the ship or whatever. And they flew into the water off the ship. So they're going about 400 knots ish into the water, um, and it hit me because you're like, what was left of that guy would fit in a shoebox that they could fish out of the water, because it's like hitting concrete when a plane hits the water that fast. And then they're also, it's what's left of it's going to sink to the bottom of the ocean as well. So they literally had almost nothing left to fish out of the water, because of the amount of violence. And you're right on the pointy end of it too. So, and they didn't ever come up with the exact reason why that happened. The guy in the back could have passed out and fell on the stick because there's a stick in both sides on those training airplanes, or the guy could have blacked out. G-lock was a common thing. Like, they just started now putting in G-lock protection in some of those airplanes. Something I fought for, lost that battle, but now they're doing it. If you G-lock, then basically you can just pass out. The plane just goes wherever it was going. Largely, you kind of let off the stick, but then the plane's pointed at the ground, it'll just fly straight into the ground, and then that's it.
yeah, so for
Um,
everybody that's listening too, like, because not
G induce, yeah, sorry.
not everybody understands. So that's the blood rushes out of your head because of the G forces. You saw that in the second Top Gun. They showed
Yeah,
the pilots or whatever, the one went into G-lock or whatever, and basically you're unconscious because the blood has run out of your head or whatever. And so it's kind of like a life or death thing, whatever.
yeah. Funny story about the second movie. So they filmed a lot of that movie out on my base out in California in China Lake, because I was stationed out there while they were filming. So I got to meet the director and the producer, cinematographer. I was actually purposely on travel the week that they filmed out there because it was like a super zoo. Like, they brought a whole bunch of people out there. We just decided we weren't going to do any actual work. They had a whole bunch of like people we had no idea who they were running around on base. They're supposed to approve everybody. Like, they hired a Chinese company to fly a UAV, an unmanned vehicle, for filming over the base, which we weren't real fond of because we did a lot of classified stuff out on that base. And there were a couple people who were like, we have no idea who the hell they are, so we're not going to do anything while this stuff is happening, basically. So we just shut down for the whole time that they were filming that week. But they had good catering too. They had like sushi and shrimp scampi. It was kind of funny for me because I don't know, I never really wanted to be a Hollywood person, but the guys that were falling over themselves to want to be in Hollywood and everything else, it was kind of surprising to me a little bit sometimes. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, I would say that that second Top Gun movie is probably the best aviation things. Like, a lot of those like scenes that you see all the time, the one where you see the jet flying out over the desert, it's right off the end of the runways in China Lake, where he puts the puts the jet on its tail, and you see the dust in the desert. They actually had one of the Blue Angel guys come out there and fly it. So the Blues are awesome too. So they do a great show. Um, I wish they'd work on their safety record somewhat because they've hurt some guys, and concentrate on that. But their demonstration is like awesome. And they are very gracious in saying that it's exactly the same as what the fleet guys do, but they're flying everything much tighter and much closer. And although there's probably truth in the fact that guys can do what they did, they are very selective in the guys that they pick for doing that demo job. And they're great ambassadors for the Navy and flying too. So nobody does it better than the Blue Angels. So yeah, I know a lot of those guys too. So they're awesome dudes too. Lots of people. I got to fly their test flights because they got different airplanes at one point. So they have modifications to their airplanes that people don't realize as well. So they can do unlimited inverted flight. Most of our planes can only fly for like 30 seconds or something, but there's not a lot of whole need tactically to fly upside down inverted with negative G's for a long period of time. So a lot of times the planes are restricted to like 30 seconds or something like that. of flying inverted negative G, and it's mostly about the fuel system. So we'd modify it so that their planes could fly as long as they wanted upside down. So I was the lucky one that got to go out there and fly upside down for 2 straight minutes while your eyes are sucking out of your head, because you're if you put yourself and let somebody hang you upside down for 2 minutes and then hold you like it's pulling you more than 1G sometimes, then that's what we were doing. So came back and my eyes were all bloodshot. It's like I was out drinking for a month or something, or all night long drinking. It's what you look like for 2 days because all the blood rushes into your brain. Um, so it wasn't the most fun test that we ever did, but that was kind of neat. So
Yeah.
just for some other airplanes.
Yeah. So, we were talking earlier or whatever, like, one of the things that you're passionate about is, veterans and PTSD. And this is something that I talk a lot about
Yeah.
on my shows, and then also in Angela Belcamino shows. She's a therapist too. But one of the things that I try and educate the public is that, A, some of the stuff that we went through, but B, why we have these issues with PTSD, why veterans are having these issues. And one of the things that I bring up is aviation, because I was aviation and I had to get a flight physical every single year. And the thing is like, for guys like us, if you like, I know what they say, I know what the PR thing that they say or whatever, that it's okay if you go to mental health. Yeah, it's okay. But for us as an air crew, you essentially end your career if you go to mental health. And so that's what I try and impress upon people, because why, they're we throw all this money at it. We have these mental health resources available to everybody or whatever. But like for a guy like you, a guy like me, career military people, the thing is you couldn't go get help. You couldn't, for guys like us, you can't go to mental health, because if you do, you're going to get grounded. You're going to get grounded indefinitely and potentially end your career at that point. You either have to pick another MOS, which is nearly impossible because you're probably already a senior in your career or whatever. And so it's a career ender for a lot of us, and that's why a lot of guys don't get help. And so I try and tell people that, because they don't understand from their perspective. They're like, well, we're spending all this money to it, we devote all these resources to it, but from the ground level, that's a lot of what's going on there. Would you agree?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, so for my personal circumstance, right? So we talked about flying lots of combat missions over Iraq and everything else. I never really you thought beforehand about killing people and those kinds of things. Um, I tell people about the tsunami. So over 100,000 people died in the Indonesian tsunami when we went there in '05, and we were the first people there. So our ship was a mile off the coast, and you're talking like it killed everybody, like down to foundations where there's nothing left for a mile inland in Indonesia. And we're bringing food and water to people that haven't had anything in a week at all. Nothing for the first whole month we were there. They're literally saving people's lives. But where we were at was also like, imagine 100,000 people floating around in the water all around you in big rafts of humanity, and what was left of humanity. So their houses, their stuff, babies being eaten by sharks, and people being eaten by sharks out in the water, floating around and everything else. And they're in just these rafts, and they're trying to keep the ship out of it, but they float right past the ship because it's literally everywhere. And there's nothing they could do about that. So there are guys that hit them. I mean, I still remember that, and the things that you see, and you can't unsee those, and like bloated bodies floating around the water and stuff like that. Um, but that wasn't anything compared to like being on the ground and seeing it firsthand. Um, my job was a counter IED officer, so the Navy and their infinite wisdom, Iraq was going on. Improvised explosive devices, they're still what kills people on the ground. They're basically like, imagine a whole bunch of ammonium nitrate and fuel oil. So ANFO was a kind of explosives, or they would just use an artillery shell. And then they put that in a car, and then you blow up a whole car. So you're talking whatever, a 155 millimeter or whatever kind of artillery round they could get their hands on, and blowing that up next to somebody in a vehicle, or burying that in a road and blowing it up as a vehicle goes by. And even if it's armored, it's going to blow that vehicle 50 feet in the air. And it's not the fall that kills you, even if the the shrapnel doesn't go through the vehicle. It's the sudden stop at the end, like a car crash. That's what would kill guys. Or our guys would be like, they had a 50 cal machine gun and they wanted to have an extra they wanted to have an extra box of ammo ready just in case, right? They got one loaded in the gun and it's well intentioned where they want to have something ready. But that 50-pound box of ammo, or 30-pound or 40-pound box, whatever it is, of 50 cal ammo, when an IED goes off, is now a sharp, pointy 40-pound projectile that's going to hit people and kill people, as it's flying around like that in the vehicle. So our job was to stop all these IEDs. So I got sent over there in Iraq. And what I'd tell people is, imagine open your email every day and you got 10 to 30 pictures of the worst kind of carnage you can ever imagine. Like someone drives a car into a busy marketplace, imagine your farmer's market or whatever, and blowing up a car bomb there and killing everybody, right? And then you're getting all the graphic pictures of everything that happened. And you're getting this every day, and it's American soldiers and Iraqi people and foreign nationals and bad guys and everything else, right? And my job was to look at the bombs and exactly how they set it off, to try and make sure that any bombs that were relevant to where my guys were, we could defeat them as best as we could. And also to inform our guys, like I talked about that, to tell our guys, hey, make sure your stuff's strapped down because I got reports about this happening, because they wouldn't see these classified reports about everything that's happening all around the country. But you don't realize how much that stuff is affecting you every single day. You're seeing this day in, day out, and some of the stuff is happening all around you, right? Guys, I'd go out with these guys and walk around dismounted patrols and mounted patrols. You're in a vehicle. We'd walk around a marketplace. I was on a mission once. We're going to go see what the price of fruit was in this Mosh marketplace up in Mosul. And then a car bomb goes off right next to you. So the little jammer boxes probably saved my life. I literally walked right past this car that literally exploded as soon as we got in our vehicles, because the little jammer boxes were probably keeping it from going off. They're probably just sitting there with their little cell phone like, detonate. And it's not detonating because our little boxes are keeping it from going off and literally saving our lives, because I was standing like 6 inches away from it. But
Yeah.
obviously a wire coming out of a car, you're probably going to notice. So they're most of the electronic kind of things. So we would do the best we can to get rid of all that stuff. But then you get back, right? So we talked about it a little bit, and you talked about very eloquently, and I completely agree with your perspective on the fact that you can't really say that you have PTSD as a pilot. Our planes are $100 million a piece, right? Let's be honest about it. Like, are you going to give $100 million piece of machinery to someone who is shell shocked, PTSD, not fully capable, has any kind of mental issue? The answer is probably still no. That's the honest truth about it. And guys don't want to say that they have that. I didn't want to have it either. I honestly don't think I did, and I didn't even realize it. We talked a little bit about it this last year. I've been dealing with the trauma that I had in my own life for the last year. And it's stuff that just came back this last year, right? You don't even realize the effects that trauma has on somebody. And military trauma is one kind of trauma, the things that we're talking about here. But all kinds of people have other kinds of trauma. Women have assaults and abuses that happen to them, and sexual assaults that happen to them. And that kind of trauma is the same kind of reactions that people have to military trauma. It's a little bit more understood. People report it and deal with their feelings. And we talked about it's a normal bodily reaction to stress and trauma and things that you need to keep functioning in the moment, right? And it's normal for you to fall back on your training, execute your mission, keep doing the things you got to do. And then you do that day in, day out, day in, day out. And you see that on the senior enlisted guys, right? They've been there for a year or another year, and then they're home, and then another year, and they have a hard time adjusting. And it gets worse and worse. And they're never able to sit and process the things that have happened and their emotions and feelings about it. And I didn't realize this, but you shut down all those emotions, right? And you don't just shut down the good stuff. You don't just shut down the bad stuff of like you're scared or you're angry, right, about everything, and you're mad that you didn't do it right or that somebody screwed up. I had tons of friends that are like that. Or you're mad that like how come I came home and other guys didn't, right? Because I was standing next to a car bomb. I could have died yesterday. I had another buddy. He was telling me how a mortar round hit his bunker and dudded. He's like, I would be a pink mist right now if that thing had detonated. So
Yeah.
when I was telling him about my stuff, and he's like, that's life, right? And how he almost killed a little girl. And my stuff was like a little 8-year-old girl we killed by detonating an IED. And I was telling you this earlier, right? And I wasn't even sure I was going to share it with everybody. Um, and that stuck with me, right? And a whole family got killed. And I saw the graphic pictures of the family. This little girl was in 200 meters away in a building because all the kids in Iraq, they'd sit and watch the soldiers, right? Because that's what they would do, right? That's entertainment and that's what's going on. They wouldn't get close. Like 200 meters, that's a long way away, 2 football fields. EOD comes out there, blows up the bomb that we find in place, and a piece of shrapnel goes through a window of the building and hits this girl in the head and kills her. Um, the Iraqis bring her out. They bring her back to our guys. I got to see all her blood all in her Humvee as they brought her back to the fob. Went with our guys that I'd hang out with a lot to give compensation money to her father for sorry we killed your 8-year-old daughter. Right? It wasn't on purpose. We weren't trying to hurt her. They'd cordoned off the whole area, right? But 200 meters is a long way. We're not gonna. It's a city of 1.2 million people. So think about you're going to, I don't know, it's not New York City, but it's probably like, I don't know, like Fresno or something. And you're going to cordon off like 200 meters in Fresno in downtown. You're like, it's almost impossible, right? There's buildings everywhere and there's people everywhere. Getting 100 meters is probably doing good, right? Uh, so after that, they stopped detonating bombs in place, but still, it sticks with you, right? I got to see her father's face. I got pictures of it and everything from her father's face. Um, I saw all the after action and all the other stuff, but um, it just sticks with you, and you don't realize that you haven't even processed that stuff. And you think you dealt with it, and you think that these things are gone. Um, but then it all kind of becomes true, right? You realize that, hey, maybe I haven't dealt with this stuff, and maybe it. For me, I got back after all that, seeing all that stuff, and then I was right back to flying, right? So I could just move on. I was back with my family, completely different environment, back to doing super interesting flying stuff. I went to test pilot school before I went to Iraq, so I was a test pilot. We were doing all kinds of crazy, classified, top secret stuff. We would uh, do weapon separation tests, so we're trying to release new kinds of bombs from an F-18. We'd be basically overhead. We'd be talking to the people almost overhead Washington, D.C., not very far from there, over the Chesapeake Bay. And we'd be rolling into a 60-degree dive at 1.2 Mach, and then dropping bombs in the Chesapeake Bay. They wouldn't detonate. They're like concrete, so there's no bombs, but you're trying to make sure they separate from the airplane like the way they're supposed to. So they don't fly formation with each other. They don't hit your airplane. There's videos of things flying formation and then ripping a wing off an airplane as they get stuck in the airflow or whatever. Um, so we're trying to make sure that that didn't happen. So we're doing all that kind of stuff. We're doing messed up carrier landings on purpose at the field to make sure that things can withstand the carrier environment. Doing tests like that. New weapon systems. Got to fly some really cool weapon systems that are out there. Things they just announced today that I can sort of say that I worked on these days. Putting really big missiles on airplanes, ones that they used to use to the same kind of class of a missile that they used to shoot down a satellite in space. So you can imagine the capabilities that we have. Um, Obviously, some of that stuff is probably still very classified. Its existence isn't, so that's good. But the rest of it is all like still classified today. So I was right back to all that, right? So now I'm back to flying. PTSD was the farthest thing from my mind, right? They made us sit in for a week in Kuwait, and you're like, this is the worst thing ever when you're coming back from Iraq. You're like, okay, you're gonna make me sit here and do feelings, blah blah blah. Hey, do you have PTSD? Blah. Meanwhile, I'm literally sitting in Kuwait in a tent, and I could be home with my family. The last thing I want to do is sit there away from my family for a whole nother week doing absolutely nothing. Right? The four
So
star, like I literally met the 4-star, right? Fleet Forces Command from the Navy. He came out and met us. I got to meet Petraeus while I was in Iraq, but it was it was really weird for me that a 4-star came to talk to the group of 20 of us or 30 of us that were there, right? As we are coming back from Iraq and our experiences and things that have it. And you don't even realize all this stuff. You haven't really had time to process it, and you're not going to process it in a week. They were trying, and they do care, and people are trying to do that, but the kind of stuff that you've gone through is like people can't relate to. We talked a little bit about before is like, and you don't want to talk about it to people who haven't been through that.
Yeah.
One, because you don't want to traumatize other people, and you don't want people to look at you like you're some kind of freak. You're like, what? Or you're a baby killer or something else, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
you
I
don't want that. Nobody wants that, or most people don't.
Yeah, well, I bring up, you're talking about, when you transition back or whatever. I had a friend that his name is Derek. I won't dox him on here, but the thing is he was kind of a smart ass, right? And one of the questions they asked, when you come through there or whatever, is like, because you're supposed to, like, it's supposed to be their way of like helping you or whatever, or this would be the time that they would give you help or whatever, but it doesn't really work that way. And so one of the questions they asked, do you ever think about hurting yourself or whatever? And he's kind of a smart ass or whatever. He's like, hasn't everybody? Well, he got to an
Oh my
extra
gosh.
an extra 2 weeks in quarantine, basically. The
Oh,
rest of us went home. So when
oh
you
man.
talk about, like, everybody, like, why people don't bring it up, why people don't talk about it, well, we got the career ending issue, and then also you're basically, now he's isolated in this like tent thing, and they're got him under surveillance or whatever. He was just being a smartass, but the thing is like, you can't really answer honestly, because then now everybody else is off with their family and everything, and now he's sitting in this quarantine even more miserable than he was before. Bad mistake. So
Oh yeah. It's like Team America World Police, right? He's like, "We're saving you!" as they're shooting everyone. You're like, "Dude, what the hell?"
right.
Um,
Yeah. So yeah.
yeah, I mean, it really is like that. I mean, I didn't even realize any of this stuff, and they asked me when I retired from the military like 50 million times if I had PTSD. I'm like, no, I'm good, man. Other people might have that, but I mean, people should speak up, especially at that point. But I was like, no, I don't have that. That's not me. It's something else. But I mean, it comes out in its due time, right? It's you don't even realize it is what I would tell people. Like, you don't even realize that you're having this trauma, like, and it makes so much more sense now that I've talked to about it, and I found another guy that I could actually talk to about it who isn't like judging you, and talking to guys like old vets hanging out and having a beer, right? We solved a lot of problems hanging out and sharing our experiences. I shared the other night. I had just retired. I was going to go to the airlines. I was at an Applebee's, right? So I was doing this training because I was dumb. I didn't get my FAA license or whatever before. So I had to go, I think it was North Carolina or something. I was doing this week long class. So I was hanging out at the Applebee's, just having some dinner, end up shooting the shit with this old guy who's next to me. And then he comes over and I'm telling him some of my stories about stuff that I saw, about this stuff in Iraq, stuff in Mosul. We started talking about other cool stuff that I saw. Like, I saw Osama bin Laden's blood on our flight deck. So I told him about that stuff. He's like, this guy comes over. He's like a typical kind of army staff sergeant type, right? Big built dude, looks like he lifts. He's like, "You're full of shit." So he comes over to me and he says that, and I'm like, "No." He's like, "Let's put our IDs on the table then." I was still active duty because I wasn't even on leave. I think I was just like going to this class before I got out, right? So he's like, "You're full of shit." He's like, "Let's put our IDs on the counter." So I put my ID down there, and he's like, "Oh." He's like, "You aren't lying." He's like, "But we just don't talk about that kind of stuff." Turns out he was in Mosul up in the north, right when Iraq kicked off, doing the northern. They were the like parachuting in there, doing all their stuff. He's like, "We just didn't talk about some of the stuff," and he was like, we kind of got to it a little bit later. He was like, he felt bad about killing people that were there. He was ordered to, right? And they just took these guys out, right? That was their job because, hey, we're going to establish our base up there in Merez. He's like, we took over that whole field and we have this whole area that's ours at this point. So, and just like they talked about, I saw this article today that the special forces guys, they killed the security forces of Maduro in cold blood. And you're like, yeah, of course they did, because either if they give them any warning, then there's so many of them that they're going to get annihilated too. So they're not going to give them a chance to pull out their guns. It's not like the movies, right? We're going to shoot them before they even realize what's coming, and then they're all dead before they even realize what's happening. So, but he felt guilty about that. And his wife came later. Turns out she worked at Applebee's. She was a bartender there, which I didn't know. But the next day I saw him because my hotel was like one of those little Hampton Inn or something that's right next to the Applebee's, because that was the cheapest place to stay. just like everybody else, right? Pilots are cheap, and they give us a discount or something because we stayed at the hotel. Uh, but either way, also a place you can have a couple beers. Um, and then he comes over and he's like, we just don't talk about that kind of stuff. He's like, I was sure that you're. I mean, we had a guy the other night that was like people that are like stolen valor kind of things. He's like, I was sure that you were, but I mean, some people don't, right? They just don't want to share those experiences and share that kind of stuff. And it's hard for people to understand like the things that you've experienced, the things you've gone through, and you don't want to share with other people about that. You want to, like you said the other day, you want to share with a dude who's been there, right? And I haven't done everything, that's for sure. And every single person I know who's spent a lot of time in combat thinks, well, I didn't really do that much. Um, these other guys, right? The guys that didn't make it back. This other dude who was the hero, right? The super capable guys that I know. I'm like, I'm not a hero, but I was surrounded by them, right? Um, you look at some of these great people and great Americans that make our country great, just being around them. So I still feel that way, right? No matter what, you're like, you see these other guys who are the shit that they've done. Had a time I was on an airplane, right? And me and another naval, we were going to Tailhook, right? So I was flying to Tailhook on an airplane and I got upgraded to first class. And there's this old dude who's there. Turns out he was going to Tailhook and he was in Vietnam in the 70s, Vietnam in the 60s, and then the 70s, early 70s. And we started sharing boat stories and the crazy shit that happened on the boat. My wingman got hit a girl in the head with a Sidewinder missile at one point, broke her skull. I went and saw her in the hospital and gave her a command coin a couple days later. She didn't even know what happened that day. So, and then he was telling me his Vietnam stories. That, like my buddy squadron, they lost. What was it? This isn't this guy. This is one of my buddies. They lost 15 of 12 airplanes, meaning they started with 12 airplanes on their Vietnam deployment, and they lost 15 out of those 12. So they lost more airplanes than they started with at the end of their cruise, which is just unimaginable by today's standards. That's like an entire squadron getting decimated, and half those guys at least don't make it. I don't know exactly what his numbers are, but that's kind of the normal thing. And even today, these days, like fighter airplanes and ejecting. Um, we talk about ejection seats because all the planes I flew had ejection seats on them. So I would always say ejection seats, they're better than the alternative because flying a plane into the ground at 400 knots, you're definitely going to die. But then even when you use one, the stats kind of say that you're like, you can divide it up into four parts. A quarter of the guys die, but usually because they're ejecting too low, too fast, whatever it is outside of the ejection envelope. A quarter of the guys are seriously injured, like permanent life-changing injuries, like you hurt your back seriously or your leg or some other serious part, right? A quarter of the guys are injured, like you break a leg or an arm and you're fine, or like, and then a quarter of the guys are completely fine, right? They just walk away and no injuries, no nothing, right? And they just are good to go. And that's sort of how it goes, depending on where you're at and where you're ejecting from. But it's still, if you're deciding that you're going to leave, it's probably better than the alternative in all cases. So,
Right. Yeah, that's the last resort.
but yeah, I mean, I care a lot about the whole, as I've had this year, um, vets that have PTSD or guys that do. I have a huge passion to share sort of my experiences and that kind of stuff that we talked about just recently, and to try and help those guys. Right? Talked about that. It was super satisfying. There's a lot of great organizations out there. I started volunteering with a Warrior's Journey, helping out other guys that have trauma. And it's not all military trauma, right? So Tom and I, um, over the years, I've known him for 20 years, and it turns out my best friend has gone through the same kind of childhood trauma that I went through. I wasn't going to talk about it here tonight, but there's a lot of things that affect you in that same way. And I would tell people, like, I had this childhood stuff that happened, right, from way back when with a priest who abused me. And then that stuff and that trauma kind of set the stage for me to deal with this other trauma, which sounds really bad. Like trauma builds on trauma builds on trauma. And not doing feelings and being shut down that way and being all logic but no feelings, um, which that makes it easier and better military wise, but it doesn't make you better as a person. Um, and it doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes it something that happens to you, an experience you had, and you can't not be changed by those things that have happened to you in the past. But speaking out about it, I never even talked about that with anybody until this last week, right? Or not last week, last year. I never shared it with my parents, never shared it with anybody except my wife and a couple other people, right? Tom knew, and a couple other people before this last year. Um, but it's one of those things that, like, I look back on it and you piece all these things together and you put this trauma together and you work through it. And you can share, and there is hope on the other side. Like, I was never one of those people that felt like I wanted to end it. Um, but there's guys out there that have, right? And I can easily see where you would be that way, right? You're angry about something, you don't even realize you're angry at other people, but you push everything in your life away because you just have this pain, and you just want people to leave you alone, and you want this other stuff, and you don't know how to deal with it. And then once you push everybody else away, you're all by yourself. And that's, I mean, you could tell me the same thing in the army, right? In the Navy and the army, 90% of everything is just show up where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there. If you do that, the rest of the stuff will work itself out, right? You're probably a good enough dude that you can figure that out. But if you're by yourself, not where you should be, is not going to go well. PTSD is just like that, right? We need each other. And we forget about it when we retire or we get out of the military, or even other people that weren't in the military. Same kind of things. It's the same kind of things that they had dealing with the trauma. Um, and I'm not talking about the people that saw some bad thing happen and you're like, oh, I have PTSD from this. You're like, I mean, it's a real thing. But at the same time, it's like, hey, let's, just like a woman saying they've been raped, you don't ever want to say that you have that if you don't, right? Um, it's just one of those things you don't do, right? And you want to be honest about it, and you want to be truthful with everybody and how you're feeling and what you're doing. But you also want to make sure that the people that need the support and need the help are actually the right people. And it's the same as that whole stolen valor thing, where guys are saying stuff that they didn't actually do. They weren't there. They didn't do this. All that kind of stuff, right? People get really pissed off about it. And there's a reason why, because everybody wants to be that SEAL, right? Who killed Osama bin Laden, or that dude who's just in Venezuela, right? They captured Maduro, right? So I want to be that dude, but, well, I don't want to be the dude who did all this the struggle and the other stuff, right? Everybody wants to be a frogman on a sunny day. That's what they'd say. Everybody wants to be a fighter pilot at the bar. Um, but you don't want to have to go to the funeral of your friends, and you don't want to have to deal with explosives going off around you. I mean, our friends who are special forces dudes, in this whole time period, right? For the better part of 20 years, those guys have been running around. You think they're not getting blown up? They're not getting shot at. They don't have friends that are getting killed everywhere. EOD guys that I knew. It was a really dangerous business, right? So those are the kind of things that, it's a brotherhood, and it will always be a brotherhood. But at the same time, we need each other, not just then, but now, even more now, right? To be able to share these stories. Um, I never thought about how many people actually serve, but it's less than 1% of America has ever served in the military. And if you want to take the guys that are actually there, the fighting people that were in the Army and the Marine Corps and the Navy, and the Air Force, like, you start shrinking it down. The dudes who are actually getting shot at, the dudes who are really there. I mean, at least I looked at it, the armies, there's like 10 major fighting units ish. Um, you probably can tell me there's more or something. I don't know exactly, but um,
Well,
those.
yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of people that saw a lot of action in the army, and like you said,
Oh
there's a
yeah.
lot of people that are on base and stuff that never do. But the thing, like for me, when I was retiring or whatever, I had a pilot friend. And the thing is like I never thought to get help for myself. Like I never like because I wasn't sleeping good. Like anxiety was through the roof and all that stuff, and like it was really affecting me. But I didn't know it was affecting me because I'm just driving forward. Like I'm thinking about like my career post military. I'm thinking about all these different things. And I had a pilot friend that he talked to me one day, and he was like. He's like, hey man, we've been through some shit. And like, I went to a therapist myself or whatever. And he's like, you should probably think about doing that yourself. And that's really what it took for me to go get help for myself, because I was like, well, shit, he's right. Like we have been through a lot of stuff, and I pulled up a video earlier. It kind of got you were on your story or whatever. I didn't want to distract or whatever, but like
I know you're good.
One here's I'll present it here, but let's see here. Let's go. But like this is one of the missions that here. We got it. One of the missions that I was on.
Radio.
Oh.
Over the radio, they're referred to as heroes. Task Force Shadow is an aviation unit based at Bagram Airfield. Its presence is vital, given the increase in enemy activity over the last year. The aviation company of the 101st Airborne here at Bagram Airfield is one of the busiest units in the country. They're constantly being called on every day to ferry troops and equipment all over the eastern part of Afghanistan. But there's one other part of their mission that's even more important, and it goes by the call sign, Dust Off. Several times a day, sirens signal the need for emergency medical evacuation. On call at all times, this small team of highly trained pilots and medical personnel is ready to respond. Dwayne Taylor is a medevac helicopter co-pilot.
Basically, we're flying emergency room. We have everything that a patient needs in the back to stay alive, even all the way down to shocking that person to restart their heart.
It isn't long before the call comes in. A roadside bomb has hit a convoy south of Kabul.
That's me.
There are 6 urgent casualties. The crews rush to their aircraft, and moments later, we're airborne. The tension rises when we receive word that troops on the ground are receiving rocket and machine gun fire. It's expected to be a hot landing zone.
It's constantly running through my mind. Every single time we go to a point of injury that we could possibly be shot at or be attacked at while we're sitting there on the ground.
We touch down hard in a cloud of dust. Even before it clears, the wounded start to hobble aboard. That's when we get the terrible news. 2 soldiers of the 101st Airborne have died of their wounds. Over the radio, they're referred to as heroes. Emotions are high, and I drop my camera to help one of the wounded buckle in.
Hang in there, you'll be all right.
Then the soldiers returned with one more litter, one of those killed in action. That hero's name is Donnie Carwile, a first lieutenant who left his job as a policeman in Oxford, Mississippi, to lead a platoon here in Afghanistan. Back at home, his wife Jennifer and 2 young daughters would soon get the painful news that their lives have changed forever. But there wasn't time to grieve. On the way back to base, the flight surgeon and medics worked with grim efficiency to stabilize the wounded. Upon landing at the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses whisked the soldiers off to surgery. At the end of the day, I sat down with the platoon commander, Lieutenant Graham Inman, and talked about the stress that comes with doing this kind of work every day.
It's cumulative, and it's not like it just wears off. And everyone has, in my personal opinion, has their own threshold of what they can handle. This isn't a job that you can do and not be affected by.
One of the ways these pilots deal with that is through volunteer work with the children at the hospital next door. There, military doctors treat many local Afghans, and these kids bring joy to men who have seen too much of death.
So every time I look at those kids, I see my kids.
Without a doubt, the hardest thing is being away from the wife and kids. But all you have to do is see the Afghans and how they're struggling and how they're trying to better themselves and their families, and you realize that this is something that needs to be done.
I get a great sense of satisfaction out of what I do. I wouldn't say that I thoroughly enjoy it. There's some very unpleasant things about my job, but every day when I go to bed at the end of the night, I know I've saved lives.
And as for me, I can say that after.
So that was me on a mission. You know, that I was the crew chief on that mission, but that's just some of the stuff that we used to see on a daily basis. That wasn't even, the first lieutenant that died in there or whatever, it's a tragedy or whatever, but like we used to see that stuff on a daily basis, unfortunately, especially medevac. So that's just what we do. We go out to the battlefield and get those guys. But the thing is like, back to that pilot that told me that, hey man, you should probably get some help for yourself. He was right. And, as a man too, it's especially difficult. we don't want to, especially, at the, pinnacle of your career, like you're the tough guy, you're the fighter pilot, whatever, like you're everybody relies on you, you're your commander or whatever, like and for you to admit that, hey, I probably do need help, is really tough for a lot of people, and so a lot of people don't get help.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to find the right person too. Like the other guy that I'm talking with, right? So he went to the VA. They gave him a woman counselor, and not to say that she's bad. She's probably amazing, right? But there's a whole nother level of like opening up to a woman and a man. There's really gender issues, right? I don't want to be vulnerable to another woman a lot of times. And there, you also don't even want to mix any of those other emotions, especially if you've been shutting those down, right? Because if strong emotions build strong emotions, and you don't want to build a connection with someone else like that. And you are going to build a connection as you start working through this. And if you don't, then you probably don't have the right therapist or the right counselor. If you're not building a connection with that person, if they're not listening to what you have to say, and not sharing some of their own eventually, right? Some of the stuff that made them want to be a counselor, made them do what they do. And it's hard to like you said, the hardest thing is the first step, right? But at the same time, you're like, there's some of those things, right? If someone feels like they want to be a suicidal, and we talked about that, like there's more than 17 veterans a day that kill themselves. It's more than twice the number for civilians. And if you look at female veterans, it's more than 90% higher than the civilian suicide rate, which is just sad and hard to speak about, right? That this is all happening, and it's these experiences from the last couple decades of war are spread a lot, right? And a lot of guys have had these kind of experiences, things that are unimaginable everywhere else, right? You can't imagine like going down the street and seeing a car bomb, or like you seeing casualties like that. Like the guys I was with, we had 8 killed and 100 wounded. We had our battalion squadron was oversized. We had about 1,500 guys in it, and women, right? Mostly guys, but there are some women in it that were in our squadron. And that's, you put that number in your pocket and you're like, it's not quite 10%, but it's getting close to it. So it's like once a week, guys that get blown up, once a month, someone to get killed ish. If you do the round number sake, and you're like, wow, that wears on you. And these are guys that you see every day, that you're working with, that you know. And when you say wounded, I mean like, dude got shot in the neck or got shot in the arm or the leg. Like those guys didn't die generally in Iraq and Afghanistan because of body armor and everything else. Like bullet wounds or shrapnel wounds didn't typically kill people, but IEDs did, or vehicle things tended to, at least where I was anyway.
Yeah.
Just because of the size of the explosions and things like that, and the level of protection, right? So medical stuff advanced a lot. You guys were part of that. For us, when we were there, you're like at Mosul on Marez, there was a level 1 trauma center, essentially. So if you got back to the FOB and got there, you might as well be in a major metropolitan level 1 trauma center. Like there's probably no better place for you to be to deal with the issues that you have. And the surgeons that they had there were probably the best in the world at dealing with that kind of wounds and that kind of injury that they would see, like the whole shock and compression injuries and things like that, and concussions and broken bones and shrapnel injuries. I mean, I don't know. It was like some of the brutal stuff that you learned about, right? Is like the whole like CPR doesn't, if you're not breathing and your heart's not beating, the chance, and you don't have a defibrillator, the chances of saving someone's life are like in the single digits, low single digits. So you're like, but if your heart's beating, then it goes way up. But if your heart's not beating, you're not breathing, you're like, you're like, that guy's dead. If there's nobody else that you can help, then help that guy. But if there's somebody else that needs your help that may possibly be, you're like, deal with that person and then deal with that person, like basic triage. Like I did a combat medic course, so, and like I wasn't as far as you guys were as far as all the medicine stuff, but that's the stuff that I learned when I was over there. They taught us how to do attention pneumothorax. They taught us about tourniquets. They're like, because for those of you who aren't medical people, attention pneumothorax, there's a We Three Kings is a great movie that shows us sort of a depiction of it. Essentially, like you get a chest wound that opens up your chest and it'll cause your lung to collapse. So air can get sucked in there and it'll cause your lung to collapse. And the way to fix it is basically a hypodermic needle that you stick into someone's chest between the ribs, and it allows the air to get out, and then you can shut it back up after it, and allows that person to live. But if you don't treat it, then you'll suffocate to death relatively quickly. And if you can't breathe, then you can't survive. And all our stuff was all about stop the bleeding and keep them breathing, basically. So, and tourniquets were like, use them, use 1, use 2, use 5, use them the right way first. But if you need more, keep using them. If you can keep somebody from bleeding to death, then they're going to live, and they're not going to lose arms. They're not going to lose legs. I don't know. That's the kind of stuff that I learned, at least when I was there, and seeing the stuff around us all the time. Luckily, I didn't have to actually do any of it, thankfully. And I didn't go out every day either. So I was on a battalion staff. I was their like loner pilot, fighter pilot dude in an Army Cav battalion. So they would have felt bad if I got killed, I think. Plus, I was helping them find bad people too, because I had a security clearance. I'm pretty proud. We found the most prolific bomb maker in Mosul while I was there. So I was pretty proud of doing that. Of all the things that I did in the military, that guy had a engineering degree from a major United States university, and he was building bombs all over Mosul, right? And we had his fingerprints on the inside of bombs, and we had traced him back to a whole bunch of bombs. So he's not in the world anymore. So that was pretty satisfying. So I always kind of looked at, there's some people the world's better off without. So he was kind of in that category. But
Well,
anyway, yeah, crazy.
yeah, well, I want to be respectful of your time. We've been going at
Yeah.
this for about 2 hours now. We got like 11,000 people listening. So,
Dude.
I told you there's going to be people that are interested in what you have to say, and you got a really cool story, and you know, I have a ton of respect for naval aviators. It's becoming a pilot is tough. Becoming a naval aviator is a lot tougher. Landing on carriers, the amount of training that it takes to get through there. You talked about, just all the different things that they're throwing at you or whatever, like just high level of precision, plus all the military stuff, all the PT tests, height and weight, you're going to other training and stuff like that. Just a lot going on. So I have a ton of respect for you guys, and I appreciate you. And you guys have saved my ass a lot of times.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's where we were in Afghanistan, right? So I did 2 tours in Afghanistan in the air. I never had to land in Afghanistan. I never set foot in Afghanistan, but we were all over that place. And so basically our contract, we were 60% of the air support when we were the carrier that were there. So if you had TAC Air, if something bad happened in Afghanistan, we were there basically anywhere in Afghanistan at the time. And that counts there was A-10s that would fly around. There's some AC-130s and stuff that would fly around different things. There was Harriers are actually in Afghanistan, which I don't know. I'm not a huge Harrier fan just based on its capabilities, and you have to protect all that. And they literally couldn't fly far enough to go to Afghanistan, so that's why they were actually there. But I mean, people love them, that whole thing, they've gone away. But either way, so if something bad happened in Afghanistan, our contract was the second that a guy called a troops in contact. So someone's shooting at them and we'd call it a tick, a troops in contact. The second that a tick was declared, the clock started ticking, and we would be overhead within 15 minutes anywhere in Afghanistan. And if you're around Kabul or you're in Kandahar, you're really probably talking like seconds, because we probably already had someone there pretty much 24/7 whenever operations were going on in either place. And we were like, so we'd show up, and you're showing up on a guy's worst day, right? So you guys are getting the wounded out of there, but we're showing up before you guys are even safe to land there the second that someone's getting shot at. So you're basically talking to a guy on the ground. Sometimes you wouldn't even be talking to a guy who was a forward air controller that's used to talking with airplanes. You'd have improvised things, somebody that could pull up our frequency and talk to us. And his buddy next to him in the building just got shot. And he just wants the bad guys to die right now. And he knows that you can do that. But we would show up, and we got it, and we'd have to talk a couple of times you'd have these, you got to get the guy to calm down, right? And hey, just calm down and tell me where you are and tell me where the bad guys are. Because as much as our bombs kill bad guys, if we drop a bomb on your building or close to your building, then we're going to kill you guys just the same as we're going to kill the bad guys. So, but I mean, if that happened, I mean, our first instinct, our first things like training wise, we'd give them a show of force meaning a low flyover. In Afghanistan at the time when we were there, if we did a low flyover, those guys, it was like ants running away because they knew the clock was ticking when we'd show up, from years of experience that they weren't going to be long for this world if they decided they want to stick around and fight with us. So they would literally be a group. If there was more than 3 guys together, they would split and run in different directions because they know we can't follow all of them. And they'd go into buildings and out of buildings and into caves and out of caves and underground. So they know that it can't be seen by air. There's helicopters and stuff too. So they're following them too. And it's a team effort. But they knew when we showed up that they would start running away. And it depended on the situation, on what's happening, right? If it's somewhat stable, then we're just going to concentrate on making the bad guys pay. But if there's a guy that is, they're attacking these guys actively, then we're just going to find their position and fly right over the top of it as much as we could. And the bad guys would run away instantly when that would happen, at least when I was there. So, and then we would try and find them and kill them. Because again, the world's better off without them. So,
Right.
and we're pretty good at our job too. So, but like you said, I mean, that was my version of Afghanistan, I guess. I remember a time we had these MARSOF, Marine Corps Special Operations Force guys. They moved right into Helmand Valley. So the Helmand River Valley is the historical home of the Taliban. That's where those guys are from. That's where their historical and basis is. So that's where those guys are from and they live. So they decided they're just going to take over a little compound right in the middle of the valley. They moved in, and over the next like couple weeks, we literally destroyed every single building in that entire, for like a mile almost around them. Because they get shot at from one thing and then you drop bombs. And the second that you went to those guys, you knew that you were going to be doing something with them basically every single day because they were kicking the hornet's nest as much as they could basically, which didn't happen very often in Afghanistan either. So it was like following on, and there weren't many areas they were that active at the time. So, but all the respect for those guys and what they were doing. So, because I mean, they're down there letting guys with rifles shoot at them on purpose and tracking them down and everything else. So we're just their backup and their support to pick up bad people.
Yeah, that was my last deployment, was to the Helmand. So, and I was out of Kandahar, but we were doing operations in the Helmand. That was my last one in 17, 18. So,
yep. Yeah, I was there. So I was flying the night that Osama bin Laden was killed, actually. So it was pretty crazy. So that the couple weeks before that, like I saw this, our air boss. So the air boss sits up in the tower. He controls all the stuff that happens on the flight deck. And we'd go up there and talk with him too. He was there with us for a couple deployments, and we get to know him really well too. So he's the one that is running what's happening on all the people that work on the carrier deck for directing airplanes and everything work for him. And then all the stuff in the air, he's sort of directing and making sure that we're safe and that we're doing it effectively, right? So I was up there talking to the air boss in the tower. So he's on the very top of the island of the aircraft carrier, like 11 stories up from the bottom or something. I think it's 11, something like that. It's a lot. You just keep going up the stairs until you get to the top. But anyway, so we're sitting there hanging out and talking with him, and he's got a wind over deck requirement for an Osprey, which we didn't really have Ospreys that came out and landed on the ship, the Marine Corps Osprey things at the time. And we're like, huh. I was like, I used to see those things flying around Pax River all the time because they did testing for those things. They have a really unique sound. And I didn't think anything of it. He's like, yeah, we might get them later on. So he's looking at that. A couple weeks later, we're flying, and we don't really know that the Osama bin Laden thing is happening. At least I don't know, right? But we are flying missions over Afghanistan every day. And that day, they told us the previous day that they wanted us, that they may shut down the ship's nuclear reactor because they were going to do a reactor safeguard test inspection while we were flying, and that we might have to get diverted to Muscat, which is like 150 miles away from the aircraft carrier. So our admiral's sitting in this briefing for all of us flying into Afghanistan, and we're sitting there getting the normal briefing, which every combat mission we'd have a place that we would go, and then we'd have a map of all of Afghanistan and where everybody is and everything else. So we had a pretty good idea what was happening in most places, and a really good idea of where we were tasked to go, of what was happening. So we're sitting there, we're getting the briefing, and he tells us this, that the ship might shut down the nuclear reactor while we're flying, such that we can't come back and land on the aircraft carrier. And we're like, what in the hell? We're like, that's complete bullshit. And you're like, we're not gonna, like, you want us to go 150 miles away and you can't wait to shut down the reactor until we're done flying? And he's like, we'll have big wing tankers overhead, just save enough gas. And he finally gets upset because guys were getting really angry at our admiral, actually, a 1-star admiral. So imagine Navy lieutenants, captains in the Army, right, 03s, getting mad at our admiral and standing up and going, that's complete bullshit. He's like, you guys can't wait like 3 hours to shut down your reactor for something that you do? He's like, well, these guys are really important. And we're like, that's bullshit. So he's like, just save enough gas. And we're like, fine, whatever. So you can't really argue with the admiral, but it was one of the few times I ever remember that happening. So and then they actually put air-to-air missiles on our jets that night too. So that was there was no air threat in Afghanistan. So other than Sidewinders, which are like short-range IR missiles, we would never really carry air-to-air weapons in Afghanistan. There was just no air threat whatsoever. It was just carrying weight for no reason. But they put a long-range air-to-air missile on our jets, and we're like, well, that's odd. And they're like, maybe the Pakistanis were going to go crazy or something, and they were getting kind of uppity anyway at the time, before this all happened, right? So we're like, all right, fine. It's just like 500 pounds of gas that I don't have or something. So we're like, that's weird. And nothing ever came of it. We came back and landed, but then got back to the ship, and that night is when that whole raid had happened. So we landed, and then they brought him to the ship the next morning. So and pitched him over the side. May he rest in pieces. So that was kind of cool. So I got to see his blood on our flight deck because they brought him on our ship and they pitched him over the side after that. So it was our last night flying over Afghanistan. We were supposed to go home, and then so that was kind of a cool story.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. So, well, all right. Well,
yeah, I don't know. Different stories, huh? Weird stuff.
Yeah.
True, though.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I was there when they blew up Zarqawi too. That was the most famous one that I saw. But yeah, well, I appreciate you coming here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been a pleasure. We have a ton of viewers, almost 12,000 now. So, really interesting story. I'd like to do this again with you. I think you could just probably talk for hours and hours because you just have so many different experiences, and they're all unique to a lot of different people. I know you're like, oh, this is old hat.
Yeah.
Like, bro, I'm telling you, like, the people that are listening, they don't know, like, they've never experienced anything like this. So it's super cool to hear everything that you went through, your dedication to the country, the training and everything that you put yourself through. And, you're just, it's a high level of patriotism.
Yeah, but I mean, these days, like, I feel like vets, so you included, right? So speaking out for other people, saying how important it is to remember people's sacrifices, right? I'm big on the history of everything else. Like, both my grandfathers served in World War II, and learning about what they did, remembering all the sacrifices that people made before us, as well as all the sacrifices of people that we know. I mean, that's what we're talking about, is trying to help out our brothers and sisters of all the different services and what they've gone through. And trying to make other people understand that freedom's not free, that they are out there every single day, whether you think that they're there or you don't know that they're there. There are U.S. military people on watch, on the ground, in places that you don't even have any idea about, defending our country. And they're the biggest patriots in the entire world, that they've raised their hand and said, I swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, right? So throughout Democrats and Republicans, throughout whether they agree or disagree with what's going on, but ultimately there's bad people around the world, and none of those people can touch America and Americans because of the things that they're doing. And it really is true, right? I mean, when I was in Iraq, we were finding a whole bunch of people named Mohammed. Imagine that. like everyone in the Middle East is named Mohammed, and some of those people lived in the United States. We mentioned Edward Snowden and one of our little previous things. So my dad used to be like, "Oh, he's a patriot," and I'm like, "No, he's not. He's a fucking traitor, and we should put a bullet in his head." Like, because there was a process that he didn't follow and he didn't do, and all he did is destroy the security of the United States to the benefit of our adversaries and no benefit to everybody else. Because I would tell him like, well, how do I tell somebody about the top secret government program that doesn't exist and the controls that are on that without telling you that there's a top secret government program that doesn't exist? And to this day, not a single political person from either party has ever spoke up and said, oh, he did exactly the right thing, right? No one has. And that should tell you something when Democrats and Republicans are both agreeing that he's a traitor and he still lives in Russia and he should. I don't know, because all he did is hurt a whole bunch of people that I care about greatly. So
For sure.
anyway, so yeah, lots of stuff. So yeah, I appreciate being able to be on this show. Like my friend Tom and I are going to start a show here coming up in March as well. So I got to remember the name of our show. I should probably. He was supposed to be on here tonight, so I was expecting him to show up and plug our show that's coming up in March. He's got some personal stuff going on, so we're delaying it a little while. So that's probably why he's not here tonight.
Yeah, well, I mean, for everybody that's listening, follow That Kind Warrior on X. You know, just a fantastic story that you have, really interesting, and you're super knowledgeable. So I just appreciate you coming on here and sharing that with everybody, and super cool story. I know you have more.
Yeah. I mean, and if nothing else, right, help somebody else around you, right? The thing that I learned, I said this in my retirement speech, that you're like, the biggest thing I learned through all this stuff, right, is people are people all around the world, no matter who they are. They all kind of want the same things. They want their kids to have a better life than they did. They want to find somebody they care about, they love, and they want to have their kids have a better life, right? And that's the same thing that the whole world want. They might have anger and everything else about some other thing, but it's pretty much true from every single person I've met, whether they're Muslims or Christians or anything else, right? They still want the same thing. And that's it, right? It's that simple. So be kind to each other as much as you can. Sometimes life is different, right? If you're a soldier or a warrior, then sometimes that's your job, right? So I always talk about like the Roman centurion. So I'm a Christian. So the Roman centurion was still a centurion after he became a Christian. So he didn't stop. He was still a warrior. It's not something that is apart from that.
All right. Well,
Cool.
appreciate you coming on tonight. Call sign Fido, That Kind Warrior on X. Thank you so much for coming here tonight. Thank you for sharing your story, and you're welcome back anytime. I appreciate you, brother.
Absolutely, brother.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, there you have it. That Kind Warrior, super interesting guest. I was really excited about him. I appreciate everybody coming in here, all the comments, Land of Illusion, Jeff from Georgia, and Mama's Treads, just Bayou Boy, a lot of different people sharing, commenting, contributing and supporting. Thank you guys so much tonight. It was a great show, had a lot of listens on the show, and I just appreciate you guys. Thank you so much, and look forward to the next one. Y'all have a good night.